Good day to everyone joining us for our session of the Human Rights Research and Education Center on our 40th anniversary. Today, we will be addressing the ongoing genocides against the Rohingya and the Uyghurs. My name is John Packer. I'm director of the Human Rights Research and Education Center, and it's my pleasure to host. Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle John Packer, je suis le directeur du Centre de recherche et d'enseignement de droits de la personne à l'Université d'Ottawa. C'est mon grand plaisir de vous accueillir pour notre session concernant les génocides les génocides qui continuent contre les Rohingyas et les Uyghurs. C'est notre 40e anniversaire, donc c'est un événement pour notre 40e anniversaire de notre centre et c'est aussi en reconnaissant de l'anniversaire de la Convention contre le génocide de 1948 et aussi c'est la journée internationale pour soutenir les défendeurs des droits de l'homme. So today is also the anniversary, the 73rd anniversary of the adoption of the Convention on the Prevention and Prosecution of the Crime of Genocide, and is also, so it's International Genocide Remembrance Day, and it's also the International Day, United Nations sponsored International Day for Human Rights Defenders. It's a great pleasure to be able to present to you two very well-known and active advocates here in Canada, also to present this in the context of a project. My dear colleague, Professor Nadia Abuzara and I have initiated last year, which we call Voices, Activists in Exile in Canada, or Agents for Change, where we're trying to draw more attention to the amazing work that is being done by our guests today. Before going on, let me share a land acknowledgement. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, from the University of Ottawa, where we pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their longstanding relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to the Indigenous people of the region from all the nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. So it's my pleasure now to before introducing our two special guests, to invite my colleague, Professor Abuzara, who will provide an introduction to our project on Voices. Professor Abuzara. I should mention Professor Abuzara, sorry, just to say, aside from the fact she is a professor in the Faculty of Social Sciences and a member of the Human Rights Research and Education Center, she holds the joint chair in Women's Studies from the University of Ottawa and Carleton University. Professor Abuzara.
Thank you very much for introducing me, John. Thank you, Mehmet, for joining us today. I would like to introduce the Voices project. Before I do, I'll just say something very quickly about our event, which at the moment is conducted in English, but is being recorded. So I will speak slowly and encourage all to do so with your questions and your discussion later, so that this will enable translation to sign language in English, sign language in French, to French and other languages in the future. And why are we here? What is the Voices Activists in Exile project? Well, we can share in the chat our website and we can tell you a little bit more about it. So this idea that people are working outside of their own countries in order to advance human rights, in order to advance mental health, in order to advance well-being and healthy relations, is one that is not new to anyone here and has been going on for a very long time. And John and I, as well as many others, have been working to try to support this going on for a long time. And finally, we feel we're ready to share it with you publicly as the project Voices Activists in Exile. And there is great emphasis, thankfully, on, for instance, support from government and people in Canada to human rights defenders and other activists internationally. And then the idea is that many times we will provide refuge, but then what happens? And that is where Voices Activists in Exile begins, because so many people are working continuously to increase well-being internationally, to build peace, to fight for justice, to think about a better future. And where better to do that than in a space where hopefully their families may feel safe, and not always the case. And so this project is trying to engage people who believe in this need for greater support, in this need for greater facilitation, who believe that actually a university plays a strong role in this, and that the partners, such as Scholars at Risk, such as community organizations, such as women's organizations, feminist organizations, such as all of the community who try to band together to support one another in these difficult times. And we know that activists in exile, sadly, are very often at risk, and not only when they are inside of their countries, but also when they are outside. In fact, sometimes especially when they are outside. And so it is really important for activists to know one another. We're very excited to have activists from Brazil getting to know activists from Yemen, from Syria, and people like yourself, Mehmet. So without further ado, I would like to turn the floor back to the other speakers, and to thank you for joining, and to invite you to browse our website and to contact us directly to let us know if you would be interested in joining as an organization or as an individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia, for that, to let our viewers know that our project on Voices and what it's about and what we're hoping to draw more attention to. Please watch for that. We will put into the chat a link where you can see already the profiles of 10 persons, including 2 as part of today's presentation, but we hope to build upon this, so please watch for this forthcoming. So now I would like to invite a presentation from one of our speakers, Mr. Mehmet Tohti. So today is a particularly interesting day. I believe that, actually I'm going to start in a different order. Welcome, Yasmin, we're delighted to see you. I'm going to actually start not only because ladies should speak first, I was taught as a child, but also because we understand that our guest speaker, Yasmin Ullah, may have to leave us a bit early today owing to an important meeting that has arisen for her in respect of her advocacy. So let's hear from her first. Yasmin Ullah is a Vancouver-based Rohingya social justice activist. She formerly served as president of the Rohingya Human Rights Network. She's currently part of the steering committee of Bridges Myanmar project, where she works to build an alliance among young people from various ethnic communities in Myanmar. That's essential in the current context. For those of you who may be following her on social media, she's dynamic. She's extremely active, and always we know what Yasmin Ullah thinks, and that's very important, is to have clarity of thought in these challenging times when there's a lot of confusion. So it's been personally a pleasure to get to know Yasmin Ullah for quite some years now, and we are honored that she has agreed to speak to us today. Yasmin, you have the screen as it is.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Professor Pecker. The honor is all mine, and it's such an honor again to be with you all today. My apologies, I am in a hotel, so the connection is not always reliable. Um, but I wanted to speak with you all today. I think probably a little bit differently than what usually goes on with the current topic or the topic at hand about genocide in specific. I think we've heard enough. Probably most of you all in this room already are aware of what has happened to the Rohingya, and perhaps with our brothers and sisters in East Turkestan as well. But I want to touch upon a few key factors that have basically really made it all, basically woven all of our plight together, which is the economic incentives. And I don't think that we emphasize about this enough. And I want to highlight this in a few different quotes that I have fortunately been able to research on and really really dig through the core of the problems that we deal with, which is not only inequalities that have driven Rohingya out of their own homes, or hatred between religions. It's not really the surface value of things that we see, but more of how does the authoritarian regime or how does perception of democracy really drove us into the brink of extinction like this. And that's just give me one moment, please. And that's really the core of it all is basically neoliberalism. And what neoliberalism does in Myanmar is that it actually highlights, or rather, given the power that needs to or should have been given to the people, or the people should have the ability to exercise their own agency to have that power. Instead, that power now lies upon the military regime, and it has become a tool that the military has been using in order to justify and justify their violence against ethnic communities. But at the same time, it's also helped them to basically gain as much wealth and gain as much power that it has right now. And through the quasi-democracy society, it has basically legitimized the authoritarianism within the country, where people think, oh no, it's okay that Myanmar has some sort of perception of democracy, and democratization is going to happen eventually, and that military somehow they're going to eventually become irrelevant. It's really such a naive outlook into what Myanmar has been. We've been plagued with authoritarianism since 1962, and suddenly, because there is economic incentives within the country to mine, to basically dispossess the lands that basically are truly the owners of those lands are actually ethnic groups. When there is that kind of incentives, the authoritarianism suddenly no longer is a problem or poses a threat towards the global community. And just because there is a democratic icon does not mean that all of the problems within Myanmar is solved. And I'm referring to Aung San Suu Kyi here, where a lot of Western democracy has placed a huge priority on her becoming our savior within Myanmar, that she was going to push the military out eventually. well, we have seen what happened. The military let her basically used her as a promoter of Myanmar now new economy. And in 2016, when she came to the US actually and spoke after her release of the house arrest, from the house arrest, apologies, the leader then, she was saying, she urges Americans to come to the country, and this is part of a new story, and to come to make profits, and that's the language that she used. So that part is why we're here today. The reason the military has ever released her from house arrest in the first place was to parade her around the world in order to bring more business, bring more, investment. And that kind of investment basically was predicated on the idea that Myanmar is now going to move on towards democracy. And, the reason why there is authoritarianism in Myanmar in the first place, and this is probably universal to the rest of the world where there are authoritarianism, is that because, of the ideology that believes the authoritarianism is mostly based upon the idea that their economy or the country's economy is backward. And so, those who believe in this ideology basically believe that if we capitalize, if we changes things, if we make sure capitalism seeps through, the current existing regime and change things around and basically neoliberalize the economy, then the authoritarian problems will disappear. Well, that's not really true. And as Canterbury has spoken in 2020, it says neoliberal democratization, the political arrangements promoted by the US allies and the institution they control to replace authoritarian states in the era of globalization is at the center of diverse intellectual and political agendas, raising questions about an epoch-making global transformation to democracy. It is a key concept, not only in the dominant theoretical and political discourse, but also in everyday political language. It is being championed by ruling elites in the developed nations, the former communist countries, and the third world authoritarian states. The concept is hailed as a prescription for economic development in the two latter types of countries. The phenomenon is presented as inevitable in the globalization of capitalism with no alternative. Authoritarian states that fail to democratize are regarded as rogue states or failed states, condemned to economic backwardness, in which democracy must be imposed by sanctions and or military force if necessary by the global community of free nations. And this is basically the basis of my argument today, is that the neoliberalism that has taken place, or the neoliberalization of Myanmar, has been paving the path toward genocide of the Rohingya in the ways that it has enabled the military to gain riches from the dispossession by dispossession of Rohingya land and dispossession for accumulation of other ethnic groups' land rights, as well as continuously pushing through hate rhetoric and rhetoric that would vilify Rohingya at the very core for people to, act out on their racism. And that's, in terms of religious belief, by using Buddhism as a tool to basically establish the idea that there is only one kind of Burmese, and that is a nationalist Burmese, that is a Buddhist Burmese, and anyone outside of that fold no longer subscribes to this script of the dominance of what a true Burmese looks like. And if you need, to access power, you need to change, or you need to basically let go of those other identities. So all of this kind of paved the way for the Myanmar military to eventually not only been able to establish their power and take roots in all of the Myanmar's institution, be it political, social, economic, but very, very specifically in the economic sense, the Myanmar military has established itself with the Myanmar economic enterprises through MEHL, MEC, and MOG, which is the Myanmar military oil and gas company. All these three enterprises have taken the hold of the country and basically expropriated or appropriated all of their all of the country's national riches in order to auction it off, to sell. And very specifically in the case of Rohingya, just after basically pushing Rohingya out in 2017, August, up until around December, there were still people who were leaving. But January comes, Myanmar, the Rakhine state, the region that Rohingya came from, actually, was redeveloped or was being changed, being transformed into a special economic zone in order for China companies, and this is, I think it was a federal national company, that came in and actually developed the area in Jokpyu, and currently Jokpyu port has become the access or exit to the Bay of Bengal for China. And there was a construction of pipeline from Jokpyu in Rakhine State right up to Kunming, Yunnan State. And the entire region basically has been wiped clear of Rohingya and other ethnic groups in order to pave the path for the pipelines to basically get, oil and gas transported. And part of this is still, the current transportation of oil and gas is still ongoing. The area basically was being developed even under the civilian rule. And to this day, that was the project that tied it all back together. Now, the other example of how economic incentives have actually created a really, really horrifying conditions for Rohingya was the light infantry 77 and 33. I need to preface this a little bit more. So the military structures, how they actually position themselves economically is that within the MEHL, the military enterprises, all of these different structures of their companies, the beneficiary are all military personnel. And these include, smaller platoon, smaller divisions of the military as well. And so Amnesty International actually documented, that one of the, not only does the military personnel General Chief Min Aung Hlaing got paid through buying up arms and collecting heavy weapons and all of that. The company, the military enterprises actually name the two divisions, the 77 and 33 light infantry division, as beneficiary of some of these profits. And for those of you who don't know, these two group of soldiers actually were the ones who created, or were the ones who actually operationalized the clearance campaign during 2017, August 25th, and they were getting paid by the military company that was supposed to be seen as, a national enterprise and something that should be paid towards Rohingya. Basically, it highlights that a lot of the shareholders are military units and high-ranking military officials, and they are all they're all implicated in committing genocide or genocidal acts against Rohingya people. And so I want to end here, but to just leave with the conclusion or to leave with the action items. I think when it comes to business ties when it comes to people doing business with genocidaires or people who have connections with those who, shady figures, or those who have not been really critical of their own position when it comes to economic incentives or economic ties towards mass atrocity, it might be, it might sound like we're overthinking or something of that sort, but as a global community, we do have responsibility over one another, and that is to keep each other safe at the individual level. And the best thing that we probably could do is probably holding our own government accountable. And because I think most of the attendees today are probably from Canada, so it would be incredibly important for all of us to be aware that certain Canadian companies are still currently tied to the military companies. And it is extremely important that, some of these companies might not be connected, as a direct line towards the military regime, but they're cronies, or there are certain segues or network that have eventually basically bringing it back to the military. And I think that it's not just true for Rohingya, it's true for other people who have been put in the position like Rohingya, that we need to be more aware of what we have, what happens when we're not looking. And the other thing is that I think it's important for all of us to keep talking about the issue and keep paying attention to what happened to the Rohingya, to the Uyghur people, and keep talking to your elected officials, keep putting pressure on them, because that's the only way that they would actually, feel that it's important to do anything about those issues. Pressure from below is always going to work en masse. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin, for that overview, and interesting to emphasize the economic connection. Of course, as we remember today on genocide, International Genocide Remembrance Day, that of course the Holocaust also was very much predicated upon economic exploitation and the role of certain corporations and the state to exploit through forced labor, through confiscation, expropriation, and so forth. So this is unfortunately a sad story, one that's becoming more important as we live in a complex interdependent world. We see the connections. We'll come back to this in the discussion around some of the things that are being done. You hinted at them at the end of your remarks. Of course, there are many examples of this, and we saw in cases like the role of the TNI in Indonesia, where the military had an overt role in the economy and even derived portions of its basic funding through its own exploitation of its own country. So this kind of phenomenon is not new. And I think that's a perfect segue to the Uyghur genocide situation. It's my pleasure now to invite Mehmet Tohti. I say it's a perfect segue because the economic element here of the Uyghur genocide is in high relief. It's very, very visible, very many elements, and there's more and more the focus of discussion. Mr. Tohti is a Canadian Uyghur activist, probably the most well-known in Canada or amongst them. He's been campaigning for the rights of Uyghurs for many years, well over a decade in Canada. He's co-founder of the World Uyghur Congress and has twice served as its vice president. He's currently the executive director of the Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project based in Ottawa. So Mehmet, you have the screen.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Yasmin. And thank you for this program, The Voice, to be a voice of voiceless people. And Yasmin touched upon the China, the connection between the Chinese and Burmese government for sea access, Indian Ocean and the Bangladesh access. And I would like to start from here because the Uyghurs are also the victim of the Chinese government's expansion. And if you look at the one important part of the Chinese Belt and the Road expansion, just to get access to Pakistani Gwadar port, to get the energy and other resources in a shortcut, they are building China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is CPEC. And they built another economic corridor from Kunming to Myanmar, which is called China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, which is CMEC. And the Rohingyas, the victimization of Rohingya and the victimization of Uyghurs, just very closely connected. And I have spoken about it many, many times. And as Professor John Packer just mentioned, today, the UK-based Uyghur tribunal, they issued the judgment and declared that the atrocity crime is committed by the Chinese government against Uyghurs, Kazakh, and other Turkic people as a genocide and a crime against humanity. So today is the day actually for Uyghur Genocide Memorial Day adopted by the all Uyghurs. So it is important day to have this conference. So today I'm going to mention a little bit more about family side of the Uyghur genocide, which is ongoing. And in many occasions, and I mentioned and I shared about my personal story, and it is my story is the part of the whole the experience of diaspora Uyghur communities. I left China in 1991. Since then, I haven't seen my mother, siblings, or no one. Total isolation. And the Chinese government did not allow them to come and visit me because the passports are controlled by them. And I couldn't able to go there. And since October 23rd, 2016, even I couldn't hear my mother's voice, and a total silence. And this, the tragedy of Uyghurs are very common, and it started since 2016 and still continue. And I would like to give you a little bit more Canadian related the example. And my example is one, and many Uyghurs are experiencing the same, but there are some other the stories that oftentimes media also reporting about. And some stories, it is just buried with the daily routine. And a couple of months ago, I have received one message from one Canadian couple living in Alberta. And if I can share that screen, I would like to really share with you. Okay. This is the Canadian family. This man is terminally ill now, Canadian citizen, and I know both of them. And they left China in 1999, and one daughter left When they left China, one daughter left in their hometown, and the Chinese government did not give her a passport. So this family separated since 22 years. And they became a Canadian citizen. They are unable to go and visit because Chinese government or consul or embassy does not issue them a visa. Or the local governments there, they refused to give a passport for their daughter to travel and they come to Canada. And recently, this gentleman, now he's in the hospital, and the last hope he has is just to see his own daughter for once before passing away from this life. And he wrote to Canadian, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we passed that information to them. This is the ruthless story. We are talking about the genocide and the internment of millions of people and the forced labor and forced sterilization and so many ugly sides. But this is the personal story of the Canadians. Every day they are crying for their own daughters, and they lost hope to see them again. Otherwise, the parents are alive and the daughter is alive in Urumqi, but this is the sad part of the story. And we know that this gentleman, Canadian citizen Hussein Jalil, just imagine his children now grown up, and the youngest boy now, he's entering the university, but he doesn't know his father, and other young boys never seen this gentleman since March 2006. He went to Uzbekistan to visit his wife's parents and abducted there by the China and sentenced for life. And almost how many years? 15, 16 years. We don't know anything about him. Even the Canadian government doesn't know this gentleman is alive or dead. And this family is totally destroyed. And the children are being grown up here in Canada without knowing their father. And when two Michaels arrived in Canada by special charter, and this family looked for, at least the children and the spouse looked for the pillar of the family, Hussein Jalil, but he was not there. And it looks like when we talk about this issue with the officials in Ottawa, always we were told that his case on the top of the priority list, but we never get any update about his health, about his well-being, whether even he's alive or dead. And so this a tragic story we concluded in our report as the Uyghur family destruction, Chinese continual genocide element. And in our report, we worked about number of forms of family separation that resulted in the Uyghur family destruction. The one element is massive internment of Uyghurs in concentration camps and a lengthy imprisonment without any judicial process. And that massive internment, we are talking about 3 to 5 million. And this is a number at the same time, this is the families, and they have family members, parents, children. It is, their families are destroyed. And when the Chinese government displaced millions of Uyghurs, especially the young aged Uyghur men and the women, oftentimes we see on a video clip on the news, uprooting them from their social and the cultural environment. It is about, at the end, it's about the family destruction. And many people still disbelieve there is a coerced divorce, and the Uyghur activists and many they're working with us and in exile, oftentimes they get the divorce order from the government just forcing the spouse living in the East Turkestan just to declare forced marriage and just break their relationship. So it is another form of the family destruction. It is quite often. The Chinese government always use the one side of the family as a bargaining chip, and use it against another side of the family, sometimes use them as a to create some sort of hostility among the family members. For example, we know that the brothers, sisters, and of the Uyghur activists living in East Turkestan and forced to show up on the TV and declaring that you are not my brother, you are not my sister, I got nothing to do with you. That kind of family denunciation, it is quite common, and that also a form of the family destruction. And we know the forced birth control and assigning nearly 1.5 million Chinese officials in the Uyghur household, especially while men of the household being interned in the concentration camps. That assignment only just to go and visit, it is live, eat, sleep together mandatory program. And it is another way of surveillance, another way of just destroying the families. And there are many elements I can go. There is just one, this family I would like to mention. This gentleman is Tahir Iman. He's Uyghur activist. Now he's in US. And his wife and the daughter are in China. And he went to Haifa University in 2017. And then, because at that time it was the beginning of the Uyghur genocide and the internment of millions in concentration camp. And so he came to US. After he came to US, and his wife forced a divorce by the government. And the Chinese government destroyed this beautiful family. And for that reason, the Uyghurs are disconnected from their roots right now. Not only the Uyghurs in Canada, in US, Europe, and other parts of the world, because they are not, they don't communicate, or they are not allowed to communicate with their parents. They don't know their mother and their father, if they are alive or dead. For example, if one family any sickness in the family or a newborn in the family, there's no way to communicate and pass that message to the family members in East Turkestan. So it is another kind of human tragedy is going on. And we are raising this issue with our government officials. And if you cannot stop the genocide, at least you should do something about this. And there is a family unification program, and there is some sort of channels between governments, and oftentimes when we raise this issue, Chinese side is not responding. Okay, so if China is not responding, there is nothing we can do, and that also concerns us, because in Canada we don't have that many number of Uyghurs, maybe 2,000 Uyghurs altogether from coast to coast. And US nearly 5,000, and Australia nearly 10,000, and whole Europe maybe 15,000. And so Uyghurs now not only displaced domestically, now we also disconnected from our roots, from our own parents, mothers, siblings, and others, and the communities. And oftentimes, we ignore this side of the human side of the story, and we more focused on the atrocity crimes. But this is the thing that the Uyghurs live by daily, and they miss their siblings and their parents, unable to get any information whether they're alive or dead. So by using this occasion, I would like to bring this another form of human tragedy to the attention of our friends across the country, and hopefully we will talk about this much more in depth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehmet, for that, for drawing that to our attention and the human side and the connection with Canada. We forget that these are not just people and places on the other side of the globe, far away, but these are actually fellow Canadians. For our viewers, both Mehmet and Yasmin are Canadians, in addition to being of persons of origin in their communities and from countries of origin affected. And that's true of many Canadians, millions of Canadians who have dual or multiple nationalities and family connections. That's part of the mosaic of our own society and of much of the world. So these are stories of real people. These are ongoing. These are not consigned to history. These are existing stories. And I think that bringing that into public view and touching us as it does is very, very important. But the scale here and the kind of motivations are substantial. And we now have an opportunity to discuss this a bit. I want to go back to Yasmin, to the economic argument. In both cases of, and this is often the case, communities that it almost seems inexplicable. I mean, in the case of Rohingya, for our viewers, a relatively small population from northeastern Myanmar on the Sea of the Bay of Bengal. The global total population of some 3 million. One can ask themselves, like, why the Rohingya? What is peculiar? Was there something happening in the case of the Rohingya? Just quickly for viewers to know that there was not very many parts of Myanmar, Burma after independence had still ongoing civil wars. They persist. There are many in Burma, which was not the case with the Rohingya. So it's not that there was actually, and it's often said publicly, people say the conflict. There was not actually a conflict, nor even an independence movement or a separatist movement, for example. So maybe, Yasmin, you could talk a bit more about, because it's often been my own observation that, in a sense, the Rohingya are an unfortunately located people. A little bit like the Uyghurs and others are also kind of unfortunately located. We can talk about the Uyghurs in a moment, but the Uyghurs are also, as a percentage of population in China, a very small part. I mean, they're 12 or 13 million, but of 1.4 billion. So again, we could ask ourselves, why these people? Yasmin, do you want to say something a bit more about this kind of connection and explanation?
I think that when it comes to Rohingya people, there has been sort of a pre-existing stereotypes, or not necessarily stereotype in terms of, I think it's more related to racism and more, more discrimination that's born out of the hatred towards Rohingya, siding with the British during the World War II, and majority of the country, including Rakhine people, siding with the Japanese fascists during the World War II, during the Japanese occupation of Myanmar and so many other countries in the region. I think that hatred towards Rohingya continue on, but here is the actual core of what has actually happened at that point. So Rohingya, by the time Rohingya and other ethnic minorities within Myanmar have been basically colonized under the British Empire for about 200 years. Prior to that, we were actually attacked and colonized by the Burman. And during the Burman reign, we were not very happy because Rohingya within Rakhine or Arakan, which is what we call our homeland, that used to be an empire of its own, used to be a kingdom of its own, and it has, various different practice, culture, civilization of its own that have been basically swallowed by the Burmanization that happened during that time. And basing off of their, the Rohingya and Rakhine people reminiscing of what could have been during that time, there had been deals that went on. Rohingya made a deal with, the British army and said, we will help you fight this. We will help you fight the Japanese military, but you would have to give us back our own land, would be able to, call this Arakan, and basically this would be separated from the Burman rule. And of course, if we're talking about history and, it's having been a kingdom and all of that stuff, it seems justified at that point. But that had been I think, the ignition of why Rohingya had been so alienated, apart from our strategic position or location, on the Rakhine coast, where there's a lot of sand mining going on, a lot of, the deep sea port has been created. There is a lot of transportation of natural gases towards into China, and there are several other, mines that the country is eyeing on, or the military has been able to dispossess from the people. Teak and lumber trafficking is a very, very I think it's a huge problem within the region, but it's the trafficking within Rakhine State towards Bangladesh or other nearby country that has basically given rise to different kind of violence and different conflict between the Burman or the military authority and other national border guards and whatnot. So all of this combined really, really pushed the rhetoric of Rohingya over the edge. Even during the time that we had a glimpse of democracy prior to 1962, when we had election and UNU was a prime minister, there was this, push forward to make sure that the nationals' religion is Buddhist, and that anyone else who falls outside of this are sort of accepted. And the idea that we need to have one type of identity that is the main dominant, group is in itself a problem. So when it comes to Rohingya living in a very strategic area, sitting on a wealth of, fortune, I would say, and being different, it was basically a cause for the military to basically just use us, not only as a tool for them to gain power, a tool for them to actually be legitimized, and use us, basically vilify us to be folks devil, the scary, shady figure as terrorists and whatnot, so that they could legitimize their own stance in the democratizing society, where people are starting to question why the military regime or the military institution is necessary in the first place. So all of this was done in order to basically help push the military up, while basically at the detriment of Rohingya people.
And thanks for that explanation. I think just for a lot of people understanding a little bit of these strands of the kind of confluence or convergence of kind of elements but we shouldn't leave any doubt that, in 1948, with the independence of Burma, the Rohingya were part of the permanent population. Arakan was included. They were accorded full voting rights, and so it really wasn't until the 1962 coup and the military regime that this kind of progressive persecution started to take off, and then ultimately the exclusion of Rohingya from citizenship, voting, and many, many other things. And now the contemporary, where that was, but 1948, of course, well before a lot of these kind of economic exploitation elements in terms of China and so forth were much advanced. Mehmet, can you tell us a little bit similarly, like why the Uyghurs? I mean, we hear about these cases now a lot in the last few years. Both situations have long antecedents and so forth. But again, a kind of curious thing. The Uyghurs, one of the I think it's 56 officially recognized ethnicities of China. A very well-known historical, architectural, different cultural elements. But something clearly happened in the last 5-10 years that has just taken this, to an extreme. And of course, somewhat differently than Myanmar, we're talking about China as a super advanced, digitalized surveillance state. I mean, the military in Myanmar is no small under-resourced entity either. But I mean, China, we're talking about a different order of kind of control. What happened? What's the explanation here?
Yeah, it is a really nice question. So let me start from this chart. Maybe this is additional to what Yasmin talked about. This is from Kunming to Myanmar. I pronounced it Kyabku port, and Yasmin corrected that. So this is China-Myanmar economic corridor, and the Chinese the aim is just bypass this area, which is under the huge international dispute, and the Chinese export-import heavily relies on this passage. And it is also under the control of US Marine. And China tries to find out another exit entry to the sea and shorten the distance to Middle East and resource-rich Africa and the Europe. As part of it is Belt and Road Initiative. And one is from Kunming to Kyabku port. It is one shortcut. Another one is from Kashgar, from my hometown to Gwadar port. It is called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This is China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. And why the Rohingya and the Uyghur people are under the threat of the genocide and extermination? Probably this gives us some answer, this charts. The reason is 2012, Xi Jinping took the power. In 2013, it was the initial announcement, but 2014 was the official announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative. This is the Maritime Silk Road, and all land corridors that connects China to Central Asia, Middle East, and Eurasia. 4 corridors passing through the East Turkestan. And this area connects China to 8 different countries. Without this area, what is called East Turkestan, China calls Xinjiang. The China doesn't have access to Central Asia and Eurasia, and China doesn't have a border with Pakistan. East Turkestan does. China doesn't have a border with India. East Turkestan and Tibet have. And so China wants to expand, and the Belt and Road Initiative is the cover. And if you look at the Chinese domestic propaganda, you see the different narrative. And if you look at the international presentation, you see a nice picture, rosy picture, mutual development and infrastructure investment and the revitalization of Silk Road, this and that. But if you look at the inside domestic Chinese media, it is the achievement of Chinese dream since 2000 years. This is the Chinese era and this and that, all nationalistic and all chauvinistic or expansionist propaganda. And most importantly, Xi Jinping declared as a Marshall Plan. 21st century Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan is, I don't need to explain how important it is when the country said, this is my Marshall Plan. And so basically China wants to secure its Indian Ocean access if there's some problem in South China Sea. And for that reason, Gwadar port and the Myanmar port is important. For that reason, they closed their eyes for the Rohingya genocide. At the same time, they protected the Burmese regime. The China played as a shield, protective shield for Burmese regime when they conduct the genocide, full-scale genocide. And a similar thing to happen for the Uyghurs as well. China, regardless what, they want to be a global boss in 2021, and the China sees that this is our own moment, and we have to create, or we have to work with forge new allies with the countries that have a problem with the West, and the countries that problem with the democracy, and bring together at the same time for exploitation and expansion purpose, because China needs energy and resources, and most of the energy and resources from East Turkestan and the Middle East and Africa. And so they want to secure this maritime transportation. And so the Uyghurs and the Rohingyas are basically the victim of the Chinese expansionism and the Chinese ambitious plan to be a global boss. And the China sees that, okay, the Uyghurs are problematic, and without this land is important for me, but people I don't care that much, as long as I keep this land. Because without East Turkestan, Chinese expansion leg to Central Asia, it will be disrupted, and the China knows it quite well, and the China wants to invest certain amount of money. And for that reason, on the name of the population optimization, China is transferring more Chinese to East Turkestan, and they're transferring out Uyghurs from their homeland to mainland China for the slogan of employment relocation. Okay, if you want to provide employment, why you don't give the job you provided to Chinese, the settler Chinese, to the Uyghurs then? Why Chinese people should come from all the way from the mainland China to East Turkestan to work? Why Uyghurs uprooted from their home and should go to mainland China to work? It doesn't make any sense. What the main issue is just to shift the population demographics and make this area as a dominant Chinese place, because China tried every way for assimilation of Uyghurs and the Tibetans and the Mongols, but they failed because Uyghurs, Tibetans, and the Mongols, they have a long history, probably a parallel history with China. And when China has a Han Dynasty, we have another, the empires and the statehood in today's East Turkestan and some parts of Mongolia. And the China knows very well. And the Chinese, the Hanshu, Han Dynasty book, and there was a mention about the Uyghurs, and the Mongols has a very strong tradition as well, and the Tibetans, so does Tibetans. As you mentioned, China is claiming that there are 56 nationalities, but if you look at now, all of them already fully assimilated. You don't see them. For example, Manchus, fully assimilated. And the last century at this time, the China was ruled by Manchus. So where are they right now? Fully assimilated, eliminated, or only Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Mongols left. And most importantly, these three people with the unique history, their own civilization, own language, and culture, everything with their own national identity, they occupied more than 1/3 of Chinese territory with rich natural resources, oil, petroleum, rare materials, everything. And so the China, after the Xi Jinping, not only accelerated the assimilation, at the same time extermination, by using all state power, backed by high technology, and used the global diplomacy to pressure other countries, not opposing it to what China's done. Actually, China is pressuring other countries to praise what China is doing right now. If you look at the Chinese narrative, when there's a criticism, they come out another counter-argument with the fake propaganda, basically asking the government, we are doing counterterrorism, you should praise us instead of criticize us. China asks other countries to praise and support the extermination campaign, and to make this the constitutionally guaranteed regional autonomous area, the Tibetan autonomous region, Uyghur autonomous region, Mongol autonomous region. It is under a Chinese constitution. If you look at the Chinese currency, you see Uyghur script, Mongol script, Tibetan script, because It was designed in 1950s to please the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and the Mongols. And now the China got much stronger and now said, okay, I don't need you. I only need your land. So this is with the inclusion of what Yasmin said, it is the part of the imperial plan of the China and the expansion plan. So basically Uyghurs and the Rohingya people became a victim of this Chinese expansionism since Xi Jinping took power in 2014 as part of Belt and Road Initiative. So our country, Canada, we have an investment in Belt and Road the initiative in the Chinese Infrastructure Investment Bank or somewhere. We should withdraw that money. We should withdraw that money because China is richer than Canada. If there is a need, China has enough money to support this program. Why we should support Chinese project that came at the cost of Uyghurs and the Rohingyas? We should withdraw that money. Thank you.
So thanks for that. I mean, showing that map shows the geostrategic linkages and connections. And, you know, what's not stated there is it's not just a question of, you know, from an economic perspective, inefficiency, you know, shorter routes to the sea, but of course, who controls some of those routes. So those purple lines, the Malaccas, the Strait of Hormuz, the Arabian Sea, of course, these are actually controlled by, they're contested, but they're controlled largely. This is where the US 7th Fleet in the Malacca and so forth. So that explains also part of the South China Sea issues and so forth. One could imagine these are negotiable things. This is economics, you know, shared benefits of development, but you raise the other element there, which is essentially nationalism and xenophobia. So both Myanmar and both China have these strong, Yasmin had pointed out, you know, this essentialized identity around, in the case of Burma, a Burman majority. It's a modest majority. I think it's about 60-65%, if I'm not mistaken. Unlike the Han, who are 90%. I mean, in real numbers, of course, there's still 150 million non-Han people in China, but both of them have these strong nationalizing elements. Now, we can respond to this, of course, and say, okay, the unfortunate communities that are in the wrong place and kind of exploited. And as you say, Mehmet, we in Canada shouldn't be part of this through the Beijing-initiated Asian Investment Bank.
Infrastructure
Investment Bank, and so forth. But there's another element. I want to go back to Yasmin on this, because Yasmin, you raised about these companies, not just Canadian companies, but these effectively proxies for the Tatmadaw, the Burmese military, the military, which is a common feature of some other countries where they have commercial corporate entities, and where the military actually sit on boards and so forth, but they're actually thoroughly connected in the economy for investment, for production, trade, and so forth. Can you tell us something about this? And, you know, the specter now, we see it in both cases where there's public movements around, you know, business and human rights boycotts. We'll come back to boycott the Olympics later, but can you say something about this economics now? And I also see we have a question from a participant, but please comment on this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that. There was an entity that was part of the UN Human Rights Council that was created in order to investigate issues in Myanmar, and that was the UN fact-finding mission to Myanmar. And it has come out with, I think, in 2019, with the report on Myanmar economic interest or economic ties, and it has actually found that there are, 14 foreign companies that are involved in supplying weapons. And we're talking about things that are directly linked to the genocide or to the mass atrocity that has been enabled or perpetrated by the Myanmar military. And a bunch of those, the mission identified in 2019 that there are SOEs of China, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, basically South Korea is involved, India, Russia, and Ukraine in major arms related deals with Myanmar. Now, Israel was also exporting arms to Myanmar before its Supreme Court actually prohibited the further sales. Now, even nation states like Canada, our country, Austria, Japan, Norway, South Africa, and the UK have all been participating states in supplying dual use and technologies, including information security technology, target acquisition, designation, range finding, surveillance or tracking systems, cameras, and software to the Myanmar junta through a company called Wassenaar Arrangement on Export Controls under official Ministry of Defense budget. So at that point, the NLD was, actually in control of the civilian government, and under the ministry budget, under the Ministry of Defense, not only did the military budget ballooned a few like 3-4 times actually, it also made a deal. It also enabled the military to connect and to further get arms deal, get supplies to actually further marginalize or further alienate or further, perpetrate its crimes against Rohingya and other ethnic minorities. And so these are all included within the UN Fact-Finding Mission 2019 report.
Thanks for pointing that out. I mean, that's just the, we should none of us forget that in principle, unfortunately, the arms trade is a lawful trade in international relations and in most countries. But if we start to look at, how it's used, what specific elements and so forth, that's why there's still an effort to have an arms embargo, of course, in Myanmar. But I want to also go to the point about, Mehmet, you said, the malign role of China in this, particularly in the last 10 years. But let's be very clear. The persecution, and in my view, the genocide of the Rohingya far predates that Chinese development. I remember being in China in the 1990s, and actually during a period of kind of opening, the Chinese were actually very pleased to show that there were street protests in Xinjiang, because to show how open they were, that they were tolerant and so forth. Things clearly happened subsequent to Xi coming to power, and particularly post 2012, 2016, I would say. But if we talk about Myanmar, and by the way, in Myanmar, there's been a kind of strong, historically anti-Japanese and anti-Chinese public sentiment. So it's not exactly that they're puppets of that. In fact, Japan has been a lot larger until more recent years, a much larger historical investor, trader, and still today, by the way, Singapore is a very, very high investor and so forth. So just to say that it's a bit more complicated. We have a question from one of our audience, I think directed essentially to Mehmet, which kind of applies to both cases. Where you have strong, essentially authoritarian regimes and no really secure freedoms, what is the scope for officials to kind of push back against any of this? How does, the Uyghur Tribunal today said there's a genocide, talking about the state, but they did link to senior most persons, including President Xi himself. But if you're ordinary cadres of the party, of the government, how on earth do you avoid being complicit in this?
Thank you. It is a thoughtful question. the Chinese government's command chain works secretly, and it is not the open process. And if you look at the leaked documents recently and published on major international media, and you can see that secrecy. And on the top of each document, there is a stamp, top secret stamp on it. And after the leakage published on the New York Times, and the Chinese government also orders the local government and all level of government officials to erase all data on the laptops and other communication devices. And in certain extent, it is known, but it is known under different cover. For example, when Xi Jinping came to East Turkestan in 2014, and he used very open, explicit, and in some cases threatening and chauvinist language, and chase them as mouse chasing rat kind of. He used very demonizing language, just applying to Uyghurs. And so when on the top, that kind of the language is used, and it is taken as a political order by the bottom. And so it is known. And secondly, Chinese history, especially after the Chinese Communist Party took power in 1949, is well known with this kind of coded language, and they know how to read it. And all the time, Chinese, if you look at the Chinese Communist Party's official document, if you are naive enough, and if you look at only the words, you get very the colorful words in it. But if you know how to read it, and you get the bottom sense of what this political order is all about. And so when, for example, locals ask to contribute or contract out local governments with the construction companies to build a huge compound with certain security features, it is known, hey, this is more than prison. And look at the volume and the capacity. It is known. And when the government openly published the ads and how many handcuffs, how many chains, how many electric buttons purchased each year for, I'm talking about the local government, county level or a village level. It is not secret, and anyone can realize if it is the education or a vocational training, why we use this thing, the chains and the shackles or handcuffs and the electric buttons. And when the government advertised to recruit thousands of security officials with certain criteria and good physical power, this and that, with details like that, it is not secret anymore. And when government's security budget allocated to this the one region exceeds the total budget of Chinese, the overall all other province of Chinese, the mainland, it is not secret anymore. And so ordinarily Chinese, yes, they know it. And there are many reporters, they try to talk with the ordinarily Chinese people, they know it. And they talk to reporters, it is good, and we are safe here. As long as I'm safe here, I don't care what happened to others. That is the common attitude of other ordinarily Chinese people. Because Chinese government effectively tied up those Chinese with the economic benefit in the area. For example, if you're a new settler and if you receive a lot of incentives from the government, free housing and free land, and tax exemption for a number of years, 10 or 20 years, for example, regardless whether this a certain place occupied by Uyghurs or not, as long as you want it, you can get it without any problem. When you get this kind of incentives and guaranteed jobs, and so Chinese settlers already tied up with their economic interest to this land, and for that reason, they don't care what happened to Uyghurs, and as long as their interests are secured, And if government locks up all the Uyghurs in concentration camps, some of them are quite happy. And also there is a play by the Chinese official propaganda every day and everywhere. Uyghurs are bad people and backwarded and the kebab sellers on the street. That kind of narrative, demonizing narrative, is on the official media. And this is not new because since 1980s, Uyghurs cannot get any hotel in mainland China. You cannot. Oh, you are from Xinjiang, so I cannot. And they have to call the police because that is the official policy of the Chinese government. Even you are the head of the puppet head of the regional government, you only stay in a certain area in mainland China. For example, in Chinese, it is called Xinjiang Banshichu. It is administrative organ of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Each province, just like Xinjiang office, let's say on the Chinese name, we have an office there, and that office attached with the hotel, so you stay there. And so that is official policy. It is well known. And so when policy and the implementation level of that policy accelerated in pace and enhanced with the measures and the brutality, it is visible, and the Chinese people are better positioned to compare it, because when they go to other parts of China, they don't see that much security camera on the street. When they come back to Urumqi or Kashgar, everywhere security camera and the tanks on the street and the armored the vehicles and the patrolling fully armored police and the military personnel, one after another, and every 10 minutes and every corner of it is quite visible. And so Chinese people know what is going on and what is taking place, but they don't talk. I'm sorry, it is a little bit long, and I hope I answered the question.
I think the upshot of the question, is that there's probably no way out in terms of this connection with authoritarianism, that there's almost an inevitable tendency, let's put it that way, towards from this authoritarianism, which blocks any critical thinking or much less self-reflection and response, and leads towards essentializing and exclusionary and finally genocidal type of policies. I mean, especially when it's combined with extreme nationalist ideologies. You put that, I mean, and that's the whole history. That's the origin of basically the human rights regime in the Charter of the United Nations as a response to the Second World War and the Holocaust. I see that our viewer asked further, is the not caring about what happens to others, that as a kind of on a human level, in terms of ordinary, if we can say ordinary Chinese, never mind those in positions of any authority, a sense of powerlessness. Can anything be different? I mean, I'll add to that, if I may, to Deborah Parks, who's asking that, I mean, does it actually mean that essentially the CCP needs to be broken for this to change? Because the exclusivity of ideology is part of this. I mean, and particularly the nationalized and also Leninist Marxist idea of the vanguard and the ruling party, that to my understanding ideologically cannot be wrong. Mm-hmm. It conceptually cannot be wrong. So this leads to I think a no way out kind of situation. But I mean, to her question more about the individual, Mehmet, can you make, because it's hard for many, I think, ordinary people and even scholars here in place like Canada to think, well, why don't more people stand up? Why don't people somehow, react?
Yeah, and you got to understand how the Chinese system works. And you can expect that kind of reaction from a free society, but in China, the government controls the narrative a number of ways. One is media, and the second is the courts or prisons. And if you talk about anything outside of the official narrative, and you know where you're heading to, and with the very high charges, just like endangering state security. In China, the talk is not that cheap. In Western democracy, we talk whatever we want to talk, as long as our moral values just permits. There's no restrictions. You can say whatever you want. But in China, you have to think not twice, maybe 100 times before saying one word. And for that reason, I understand that ordinarily Chinese people, one is brainwashed by the official media, and the media doesn't talk about that, always repeats as a parrot the official narrative. So maybe people get brainwashed or get influenced by the official media, and sometimes they may not believe what we are talking about here. This is one reason. And secondly, of course, the Chinese bureaucracy and the government is biggest government in the world from top to bottom, village system. There is a communist party system in addition to government. So it is two-tier, the government system. And so when the political order and a certain plan or a project like this that came from the top to all level, there are many people know this. And so it is not already a secret anymore. But the problem is for those who knew what is going on, and those who knew what they are doing, they don't have that the gut to talk about, or they're afraid if they talk, what is the consequence? And just I have to remind the one incident which happened in 2000 at the end of 2017 or 2018. There's one Chinese Communist Party village chief or a county chief, I don't remember exactly. And he released nearly 7,000 Uyghurs from the concentration camp. His excuses, there's no room. And the government gave the order to fulfill. And that poor man did not find a space to put all the Uyghurs. The camp is full. And so in order to accommodate the newcomers, he released 7,000. And he talked to media as well. So it was, it became a flash and a big news on the media. So he's sentenced for life. Just for him to contradict the government order. And so in China, especially, but again, I think there are some Chinese people, they are collecting some crucial information, and they know, not only know the Chinese system, at the same time, they know some international dimension of this, the crimes as well. So many of them are there collecting information, and some of them already start to leak the information out. Otherwise, how we can get those leaked documents in New York Times published there, and so many documents are leaking right now. And so we have to wait and see, and the Xi Jinping they made the things much tougher right now. Even the potential the people with closer in influence and other power structure to him now being eliminated one by one, and that includes some celebrity stars just like Jack Ma and the others, right? And so the Xi Jinping, whoever or whatever is coming close to create some kind of the danger for his political future in terms of influence or a public opinion shaping and many things. I'm not talking about authority. And so he is eliminating that voice as well. And for that reason, it is not that easy to talk in China.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, that there is you did point your finger. There is a little bit of hope that there are remarkably courageous and inventive Chinese ethnic Han who are doing things like going and recording. We just saw a week or two ago a person who got videotape of some of the detention centers and so forth. So there's technology that's being used. Certainly the reaction just yesterday, of course, there's the whole Jimmy Lai support group internationally. There's the Peng Shui, where exactly you, as you mentioned, Mehmet, that people, even ordinary Chinese, despite the massive media and information control, they don't believe. It's very clear that not everyone believes the story. So I think we have to have some hope in that regard. Well, thanks for all the speakers. It's the end of our period, but I want to invite Professor Abuzara to say a couple of words just in closing. So thank you very much, and Professor Abuzara.
Thank you, John, but especially thank you very much, Mehmet, and thanks to Yasmin for this very informative session together. I would say that for me, I learned a lot about Canada's role. And I bring that back to this question of, well, why would support be found within Canada for activists in exile? And I think the answer is because support, unfortunately, is found in Canada for human rights abuses, for imprisonment of journalists overseas, for consequences for people who act for gender justice. And as Yasmin very eloquently pointed out, and Mehmet with the geographic overview, there are very strong economic interests that come from here and are tied to a history of here that continues into the present and that extends now beyond this geographic region and internationally. And so that tying together was very helpful for someone like myself who has never been in these regions to learn about the ties and to better understand, well, one of the reasons why activists in exile need to be supported here is because there's already active involvement from here in negative ways. So at minimum, we need to be aware of that, try to address that. At our very least, let's not do harm, right? So that was very, very interesting and very important for us to learn. And I hope we continue to do so. I hope this is the beginning of many exchanges between ourselves and between a wider community of people who would like to know and need to know. And I will close on a word of thanks to all who contributed, to those who contribute to the endowment of the Joint Chair in Women's Studies, to the endowment that makes possible the Neuberger-Jessen Professorship, to those who contribute to the Human Rights Research and Education Center, to Scholars at Risk, to the institutions that host these. We are very grateful and continue to be grateful. And I would like to let you know, for all those who are with us today and who may not be with us today, but may be able to watch both events as recordings in the future, that tomorrow the Human Rights Research and Education Center hosts yet another major event with no fewer than three special rapporteurs of the United Nations who advise as in the position of special rapporteurs. So those, I will name them, the link is in the chat, but I will name them. They are Leilani Farha, Michael Link, and François Crépeau. And the host of that event tomorrow is the former Director General of Amnesty International and the current Senior Fellow at the University of Ottawa, Alex Neve. So that event is open to all, is free to all, and I very highly encourage you to join us tomorrow, hopefully. Once again, thank you, John. Thank you, Caroline Fauché, Viviana Fernandez, and others who helped to organize this event today. Thank you, Mehmet, and thank you, Yasmin Ullah.